All right, everybody, welcome to another installment of the world famous DPT to CEO podcast, where we've been doing an interview series with other cash practice owners and other entrepreneurs. And I think it's been a few weeks since our last interview and our last live here in the group. So, anybody who's able to catch this live, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below, or if you're watching replay, really cool as well. And so tonight we have our very special guest, Jeff Bitter. And we've been friends now for like almost 2 years, like year and a half.
Really?
Yeah. We've known each other for a while, which is cool.
I didn't know it was that long.
I know.
Very cool.
I know. And like sometimes I feel like this is like weird, but sometimes I'm like, I have so many friends that I just like met on the internet. Like across the country.
New way to meet.
Yeah. And so tonight we are going to interview Jeff. We are going to learn all about him and his practice. So without further ado, Jeff, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about like your background and what led you to do what you do now.
Yeah, well, first of all, Morgan, thanks for having me on. And I love the interview series that you're doing. I could listen to PT owners talk all day that are not myself. But thanks for having me on. My name is Jeff. I'm a physical therapist from Chicago. I have owned my practice, or started my practice about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's the quick and dirty of it. I've been a PT for a little over 10 years now, I believe. Went to University of Iowa, worked in multiple settings for about 8 years or so prior to starting my business, and then started my business as a side hustle, cash in-home practice in downtown Chicago. And have been kind of obsessed with all of the content in the cash PT space and all the books in the cash PT space, and learning from people like Morgan and other cash PT owners pretty much every day for the last 5 years. And I guess fast forward to now, I'm starting to kind of build a team and continue to grow my business every year. And I guess my goal is to just see progress every year. And I've been able to do that for 5, and I'm trying to keep the ball rolling.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. And I feel like there's been like so many, based on what you've told me, like there've been like lots of ups and downs, like in the past 5 years, Sure. And kind of leading up to your practice. And before we talk about all of that stuff, I guess like, for anybody who isn't familiar with CustomFit Concierge, can you describe your like practice model and like the way that you deliver care?
Yeah. So back to my previous background, I kind of started off in outpatient orthopedics and kind of got my feet wet that way as a staff PT for about 2 years, and then ended up early in my career managing a clinic for a large outpatient company, and kind of got burnt out and with the kind of churn and burn model, and decided to leave that practice with the goal being become a really good manual therapist and kind of go the manual therapy certification route. So I ended up going on with a small kind of more hands-on private practice owned by another therapist that was really good manual therapist, and kind of felt like I really developed my skill set, got confident with treating, myriad of diagnoses in the outpatient space. While I was doing that, I did home health rehab. That was more kind of geriatric and total joints, and got used to going into people's homes and treating in that sort of environment. And actually, while I was doing both, realized that my own personal preference was going into people's homes. I loved the getting out of the clinic aspect of it and being in the environment, where the patient lives. And I felt like that was the most effective way of getting someone better. So I really enjoyed that process. However, like most of us, I didn't love the paperwork and kind of the other things that you had to do as a PT that didn't involve patient care. I just kind of wanted to be able to do that. So around that time, 3 or 4 years into that kind of combination of doing those two things, I got turned on to the cash PT model that I can't even remember exactly how, but I learned of it somehow, I think scrolling Facebook and something like that, and came on to I believe, like some podcasts with some people in the space that have been doing it for a while, and started listening to a podcast while I was in between patients and stuff like that, and learned of this other world that was kind of new at the time, that involved no insurance and involved, focusing on treating one-on-one and giving really good care to really good people. And I was kind of learned about that and figured out, like, oh my gosh, like I think this is my jam. So once I learned of it, I kind of, like I said, got obsessed with learning more and learning more and learning more. And then got to the point where I was like, okay, I think I can actually do this. So I started CustomFit Concierge, like I said, 5 years ago, in addition to those two jobs, and just did it on a very small scale at the beginning. And the idea, from my perspective, was to have low risk and kind of dabble in it to make sure that I could handle it. And I did like it, like I thought I would. So I started just taking essentially private clients inside of their homes in downtown Chicago, and kind of treating a myriad of diagnoses with the skills that I had accumulated, with my other jobs prior to that. And I loved it. I was finally kind of in this environment where I felt like I could really do the best thing for the person in front of me, and there was no other barriers to that. And from a business perspective, I really loved the kind of clean, low overhead, kind of low risk model. So from there, I kind of started to think, okay, could I really do this full time for myself? Could I replace the income of my other jobs? Is this actually feasible to be my full-time job? And I kind of just started baby steps of that, month over month, trying to get more patients and get closer to saving up enough money to kind of get rid of my other jobs and jump full into it. And about, I think, 6 months into it or something like that, I was seeing 10 to 15 patients a week on the side of some other jobs. I kind of basically backed down my home health job, but I kept my outpatient job for a little while and did the side hustle until it got to be too much to manage, and saved all the money that I was making in the business to be able to make the jump. And then 6 months in, quit my other stuff and kind of focused on that 100% of my time. And for some reason, the same week also moved and bought 2 puppies and did a lot of other crazy things in my life. It was an interesting month, but 4.5 years later, it was the best decision that I've made. And I really enjoy, I never thought of myself prior to that risk-taking experience of a business as a business owner, or I never really was going through PT school thinking that I wanted to have my own practice or start my own practice. I never really thought that was going to be my thing until I learned of this type of way of doing it that I felt way more confident with. And never looked back. I guess now, 4 years later and 4.5 years later, since I started full time, I've taken on an admin employee that's been with me for about 4 years now. And then I've started to accumulate other physical therapists like myself over the years. And we're currently 6 full-time PTs, including myself and Susan, our admin, that's been with me for 4 years. And we have no clinic and no office. And Susan works out of her home. And the 6 of us run around Chicago in our cars with treatment tables and equipment and treat people in their homes. And I love it. I think the other 5 love it as well. So yeah, we're happy doing it that way. And we've met a lot of amazing people like Morgan and doctor referral sources. And I've learned a lot of stuff along the way. So
yeah, I feel like I always come back to this thing of starting your own practice is just it's so much more than just starting a business, you end up getting so much more out of it, like you said, and meeting a lot of people and doing things that you never really would see yourself doing, which is really cool.
That is cool.
And so I guess while we're kind of, sort of reminiscing about the past and getting started, question that I have for you, and I know a lot of people who are, on the fence about starting, they have a bunch of worries about a variety of things. Do you remember before you got started, what you were worried about, if you had any fears related to starting a business, and how did you kind of overcome those barriers?
Yeah, for me, I think the first thing that comes to mind is student loan debt. I got out of PT school and had a lot of student loan debt that I didn't quite understand being in school and being young and kind of how that would affect your life and your finances and whatnot. So in going through the process, I decided once I was out of school to pay off my debt as quickly as possible. So I basically worked really hard to make as much money as I could working for other people to pay my debt off. And I decided at the time that I wasn't comfortable taking another risk in my life with a business until my debt was gone, which I don't know if that's the right way to think about it or not. But for me, at least, like I needed to be comfortable doing something else that involved risk, getting rid of my debt. So for me, once I paid off the debt, it kind of gave me like a mental springboard to be able to be like, okay, I'm like at square zero now. And this little micro risk of starting my own practice very slowly seemed like a good option to me because my fear was, I guess, being in debt again or like having it not work out from a financial perspective and being able to provide for my family. Like I would imagine that's a lot of people's fear. And that's the reason that I decided to do it without a clinic and to do it like a kind of low overhead, low risk model at the beginning, because I wanted to be able to be confident to know that it wasn't that risky to do, essentially, because I was fed up with the fact that I had paid so much money in student loan debt at the time. So I didn't want to be back in a bad financial position ever again.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's definitely like a big motivator. And, for you, it was like, hurry up, pay off all this debt so that you can do other things with your life and like not have to worry about it. And, I think that could also be like a motivating factor to start a business or at least like a side hustle, because then you can like, do this on the side and put all the extra money towards student loan debt. So that's always an idea too for everybody listening. Well, cool. Yeah. And I think like a lot of us have very similar fears. And I guess that would be something that I would want to pass to everybody who's listening is that, you're not alone with whatever it is that you're worrying about, whether it's like finances or did you ever struggle with imposter syndrome, Jeff?
Yes, definitely.
Tell us about that.
So can you like define what your version of imposter syndrome is?
Yeah. So sorry, what?
I've heard different ways of thinking about it, I guess.
Yeah. I guess the way that like I hear it most often and like what I've struggled with too is like when I first got started, when other therapists first get started, like the first thought is kind of like who am I to do this? Who am I to run my own practice? Like I've only been out of school for a year. I've only been out of school for 5 years. I've only been training for 10 years. Like who am I to start a practice? And then like who am I to charge money for my services, and like who's going to pay me, that kind of thing. It's like really big.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like I described before, like it was never really in my brain to be someone who was like, oh yeah, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going through PT school so that I can start my own practice. Like when I was working for other people also, I was also like, ooh, I don't think I could see myself doing that or doing that or doing that. Like I didn't think there was like a pathway for me to be a traditional physical therapy through insurance clinic owner type person. But I think the two things that gave me the confidence to know that gave me the confidence to get past the imposter syndrome, if you want to call it that, of being fearful about starting my own practice were one, paying off the debt. Like it made me feel like I was under control of, my life, my destiny a little bit. And getting over like some people have the mentality of things that are just happening to them, like they can't control them, but being able to pay off this mountain of debt and like just put in the work over a long period of time and see a result gave me a bit to overcome the imposter syndrome, to show myself that I could control like a really hard variable and have success with it, I guess. And then I guess the second one was because I was in the home treating through another business, like in a traditional in-home setting, I started to get like requests of like I was taking good care of people. So people would ask, oh, can I pay you privately, like to continue to treat me? Like I saw that there was like some interest, which gave me confidence to know, oh, these people are willing to like go outside insurance and pay for my skill set. And so it kind of gave me validation because there was actually some interest in that from the patients that I was seeing through another business. So those two things I think helped with my confidence. Sure.
Yeah. And that's why I like also always tell people to, get your LLC, because people are going to ask if you can see them privately, so you got to be ready. But yeah. And I think not everybody has the experience of like going into a home patients, but, there are going to be people when you tell them that you're starting your own practice or that you're seeing patients privately, people are going to ask, for you to come and see them, whether you've seen them before or not.
If you're good at what you do.
Yeah. Yes. And if you're not, then they're not going to come back.
Yeah. Early in my career, no one was asking. I did not know what I was doing.
So, well, and then that would probably be a good signal, like you said, for you to start looking into it. When the day when somebody asks, then go for it.
It's a good sign. It's a good sign that you've turned a corner.
Yeah. And another question that I was curious about, being a mobile practice and you're probably like the biggest mobile practice that I know of. Usually, it's like one person, two therapists, or like a therapist assistant. I don't personally know like multi-clinician practices. And so like in this process of growing a mobile practice, I guess my question is, did you like learn anything about being like a mobile provider that surprised you?
Oof, that's a good one. I immediately go to comedy here. One thing that surprised me is I think that someone who's never treated in the home before would always ask the question of like, how do you have the space and how do you have the equipment and blah, 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 blah. So one thing that surprised me is literally you can do a PT visit anywhere.
Yeah.
Surprising. I've done it outside in backyards, in closets, in kitchens, in bedrooms, in bathrooms, in like literally anywhere that has a floor. Like you can do a really effective physical therapy visit. And I think most physical therapists that have been around for a little while probably would understand that they could be effective anywhere. But I think that sometimes is a barrier for someone's thinking of like, oh, in the home, like, what are you going to do? Like, I don't have the clinic with all my equipment and all of this or this or this or this. And I guess that was a surprising thing for me, was how much you could do with very minimal equipment.
Yeah. And like a lot of it too is talking. I feel like I talk a lot more now with my patients than I did like in the like outpatient clinic. Like really just like exploring like your lifestyle and like your habits and like, are there things that we can change to help support like your physical recovery? And like being in somebody's home, like what's a more like perfect functional gym, to be honest, to have them.
I would say too, like the personal connection you make with your patients, like in a clinic. If, we've all had those patients that you've been treating for a while that you feel very connected to that come to see you in the clinic. It's an even deeper and sometimes more personal and sometimes overly personal experience too. You're going into their home on a regular basis for sometimes long periods of time.
Yeah.
So you get to the point where you feel like you're family with some of your patients. And
I
like that because it's another extra layer of trust, and they, send their family to you and they come back to you for multiple injuries and stuff like that. Even more so than they would if you were in a clinic.
Yeah. It makes a much bigger difference, I think, than we really expect. Like if I were the patient and I had a provider, that first name basis with, like, I can text you and tell you like, oh, I hurt my knee or whatever. Like, when can you see me? Yeah. It's really cool to have that relationship with patients. So we have a comment here, question, if you can see that. What would be the minimal equipment that you would need as a mobile provider? And less higher stakes on this, what is your like desert island equipment that you would take as a mobile practitioner? You gotta give one thing.
Well, to answer her question, or he or her question directly, I would say I would need no equipment at all. I mean, seriously, like if I have someone on the edge of a bed, with stairs in the house, and my hands, like I could deliver a pretty good, I mean, I would be confident to deliver value, you know, to most patients, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But the desert island question, I'm very tall and have an awkward body shape. So treating at the edge of a small bed would be really debilitating for myself. So having a treatment table that I've adjusted to my proper height that most of my patients can't get on without a step stool or me lifting them. That would probably be number one, because I do manual therapy with most patients that I see, and to have a table that's adjusted to my height would be probably number one.
Yeah.
After that, when it comes to exercise equipment, I love the BOSU and the RX pad. Like I just do. I think a lot can be accomplished with those two things, exercise wise. I bring an RX pad in with almost every patient because if you can imagine, like not being in a clinic without a rolling stool and without a table that goes up and down, like, so I use the RX pad to kneel on a lot, because I'm doing visits on hardwood floors or tile floors or whatever surface that I'm on. So that's the RX pad is really a saver more so for me, probably doing exercises with patients, but the table adjusted to my height and the RX pad would probably be two necessities.
That's good to know. I think like those are definitely like really good things to consider, is like, it's not just like what the patient might need, but like, how are you going to make it through a whatever 14-hour day driving around Chicago, and still make it home okay.
Yep.
I wonder, my first thought is like, I would need like a notebook and a pen, because if I don't have something to write everything down on, I'm going to forget everything by the end of the day. Yes.
That's pretty interesting. Okay. So I remember, this is kind of off topic, but a random story that it made me think of. So when I was in PT school on one of my clinical rotations, I always remember this. I shadowed this older female PT that was like in her 60s, and she was doing inpatient rehab in a hospital. And she had been at the same hospital, like as a PT, doing this rehab for like 40 years. Wow. And I just remember like trying to keep up with her, like following her around. Like she was fit, like very good at her job and very into it. And we were just going like room to room to room. We're seeing people with all these different surgeries, different names. We're doing all this exercise, all this stuff, like 12 patients in a row all day long without like sitting down. And then I remember her and I like sitting down in the office to do the like treatment notes at the end of the day. And she would literally regurgitate literally every set, every rep, every, right, left, literally every distance that someone walked, every stair training. She just had it down like pat and would do the notes in like 15 minutes. And I remember sitting there as a, new grad that has never worked before, just being like, what is going on here? Like, how is this woman doing this? Like, insane. Like, she has to be superhuman. Like, because I couldn't remember anything from what we did. New to me. But I guess my point is, once you do something every day for 5 years, like you get really good at remembering all that stuff. Because 5 years later, then I look back on that and I'm like, oh, now that makes sense.
Like now I can understand how at least you remembered like half of the things. The
mobile practice does bring another layer to it, because you have to remember where people live and where to park. And, there's in the city, like, as you might imagine, that's a challenging aspect of this type of practice as well. But for some reason, like some people hate it, and it's definitely not for everyone, but for some reason, I just like being outside and like having the variability of it. And I like the challenge of like trying to navigate around and be on time all day for some reason.
It's just like your own like self-competition the whole time.
Kind of. Yeah. I don't know. It's for some reason I like that aspect of it.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I totally get it. And like, that's something I really liked about home health too, is just like, your schedule, and you can, change your environment a lot. Like you said, the variability. Something else that I learned too is to pay attention to like where in the city people are when you go to schedule them, so that you're not like crisscross zigzagging all over the place that you live in. It's a bad idea.
Yeah. I've been there. I still have days like that for sure, because us as PTs are always willing to go the extra mile for our patients usually. So it's hard to, someone that wants to pay you and treat you, or to pay you to see them. It's hard to say, oh no, I'm not going to drive the extra 15 minutes
I
to
know.
come see you, So, but there is, again, another layer of skills that you kind of have to develop to be able to optimally navigate through a schedule and schedule your patients in a way that's manageable for you from a transportation perspective. And some days work out really well and other days don't. And now that I have other PTs that I'm trying to teach and train how to do this as well, I'm noticing that, it just takes time and reps to do that as well. And again, there's only one way to learn, and it's kind of to jump in and do it, and you get better with it every day. And as long as you hire people that are willing to accept that challenge, they surprisingly get better at it very quickly. So I just wanted to go back to that question from that Facebook user, because that's what equipment you would need just to finish that answer, so that person understands what exactly I actually bring in every day. I've developed I have a backpack that's basically full of table cleaning supplies, bands, mobilization belts, mobilization wedges, stretch out strap, foldable hurdles for balance exercises, myriad of different things. I have like a Theragun and like some random stuff that I use sometimes in a backpack that I carry in to almost every patient. And then I have the Eric's pad, a rocker board, and a Bosu ball, usually like in my car, that I can kind of select depending on who I'm seeing. And then I have a fold-up treatment table that I've probably bought 20 to 25 different treatment tables over the years, but I've found one that is relatively light, that's a little smaller and narrower, that's easier to get out of cars and easier to transport, that has a handle on the top, that only costs about $90, I believe.
Do you know what brand it is?
It's some weird off-brand but
like
I bought some
Amazon?
of the ones that are more expensive, and they're usually too big and bulky and heavy and not as user-friendly. But if someone wants the link to that table, I can, because it does make a difference. But that's about the equipment that I bring in.
Cool. Yeah. And I think, because I think a lot of people ask what kind of table to bring. And I mean, mine that I got, it was like $80 on Amazon, I think. And it's almost 3 years old, I think. Still kicking. Hasn't cracked yet.
Surprisingly durable and easy to maneuver in my experience. But I think another interesting part too is the type of people that we tend to treat. A lot of them have home gyms, extensive equipment in their home, or live in a building in the city that has a really good gym space that we can utilize. So there's a lot of patients that have access to facilities that we don't pay to use, that they have access to, that we do our sessions in, which is always nice.
Yeah, that was something that surprised me too at the apartment complex I used to live in. They had a gym, and I asked about treating patients there, and they were like, "Oh yeah, no problem. Use it whenever."
Yep.
So, be resourceful was probably a good piece of advice doing this.
I would say one other interesting point to the start of the business, if people are listening that are contemplating starting the business, I think one thing I learned is if you're sitting out there and just waiting because you're afraid of maybe the financial commitment of starting. I started my practice with probably $2,000 total. It was literally that group of equipment that I just described, and starting an LLC, which was a couple $100s, and maybe a few other things. And that was about all I did to get the ball rolling. And then once I started, seeing patients, I basically saved all the money that I made for the, first handful of 100 or 200 visits. And then that was all I needed to kind of springboard from there.
Yeah. And that's another question that I do get asked a lot is how much is it going to cost? And honestly, if you're able to save $1,000 or $2,000, and that even $2,000 is probably even the top of a budget for a pretty lean, mobile or, gym based or whatever practice. So I think that's a really good point. And you should make that back 100% within 6 months, I would say.
People think it has to be this complete, you have to have a website and you have to have this and you have to have that. And really what's most important is that you have a couple clients to start.
Yes. Yeah. Clients are good.
Yeah.
Like we were saying before, like definitely if people express interest in your services, it's a good indication that things are going to go well.
Yeah.
But speaking of clients, one of the questions that I do like to ask on these interviews is, Jeff, if I were just starting my practice, where do I find clients? What's worked best for you?
For me, because I chose to start my practice in the same location that I was kind of already in the network of patients and previous PTs and friends and family and whatnot. Honestly, my first couple patients were patients that saw me through the home health company, and those people that were requesting, me to come see them. And I literally organized the business and then called them up and said, "Yep, I can come see you." That was kind of where I got my start. I mean, I had a couple clients that I was seeing in the clinic that chose to follow me into like the private pay kind of realm. Mm-hmm. And I think I can remember like who my first 4 or 5 patients are, and they're still my patients today. So,
oh, yeah. That's so sweet. Oh my gosh.
But I think what you're getting at is marketing.
Yeah.
And I would say at the beginning, there wasn't much marketing that I was doing. It was more tapping into whatever relationships I could think of to kind of tell people that I had a business. And that got me started enough to start accumulating a little bit of word of mouth. And at the beginning, when I was part-time, that was really all that I did. I didn't really start marketing more aggressively until I went full-time.
Yeah. And I think, even though like you're saying, you didn't do like a ton of marketing, what I really like about this approach is that like when you started, you will like write to your potential customers and talk to them about it, like instead of, like you said, let me build a website and let me do some ads, let me go talk to other referral sources and just like hope that people are going to come in. It's like it almost sounds like too simple, but like one of the easiest way to find clients is to go and talk to potential clients and say, "Hello, would you like to work with me?" Or do you know anybody who might? And it doesn't have to be super complicated.
Well, and you fast forward to now, as I'm starting to hire other physical therapists and help them build their practice. Like the first thing we do is I have them look through their entire cell phone, their entire email list, their entire, like any sort of person that they have any relationship with in the area, and draft up an email that tells them that they're starting a practice and this is how it works, and that they're asking for word of mouth referrals, because to this day, like the word of mouth referral from a previous client is the number one best referral in the business.
Yeah. And like almost always 100% convertible.
Correct.
Every single time.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And that's kind of like the 100 challenge that I ran in the group last year. I can't remember if I told you about that or not, but it's basically like make a list of 100 people and then reach out to them. And like whether or not you like actually sign up a patient or a client from doing like either of those things, it really helps to get your momentum going, and you kind of rip the Band-Aid off of like the fear of like how people might react, and you just go right into it.
Yeah. For sure. We have another question here. What do you do to market now? So I guess the short answer to that, I guess the thing that I've had the most success in marketing is to concierge medicine private practice physicians. Wow. Essentially, they're private pay doctors that patients pay for a membership practice. So I have the luxury of being in downtown Chicago, where there's several of those types of practices. When I brought my admin on, Susan, and I was full-time for the first time, her and I kind of sat down and went through finding as many of those types of practices that we could, and started to make phone calls and try and set up meetings and try and get to know who these physicians were. And 5 years later, that has also been, after word of mouth referrals, my best form of marketing has been relationships with physicians, which I guess in my observation of the cash PT space and all the education and podcasting out there, a lot of people's advice is not necessarily to market to doctors, which I understand that perspective. But at least in my experience, I've gotten lucky enough to be able to focus on that and kind of get in, on a text message basis and first name basis with some of these doctors that have sent us people that we've done well with. And that's been really good for us. So that will be my main form of marketing right now. We have, thanks to Morgan, built a new website that we also are proud of, and we're getting more traffic on the website and starting to be a little more proactive with trying to generate potential patients, from online sources, but we haven't been as successful in that as we have with the traditional kind of networking type marketing, which has kind of been what I was more confident and comfortable with earlier on.
Yeah. And I think, I feel like people always want to know what the best type of marketing is. And honestly, just like the best type of fitness is the one that you'll do. Sometimes the best type of marketing is the kind, that you feel like you're really good at, that matches like your personality, it matches your values. It's worked before, so we'll keep doing it. And, there's always room to try new things and have kind of like primary and secondary version marketing. But, if you're newer to this, trying different things is a great idea. And then when you find something that feels good and also has a return on the time investment, definitely follow with that. And I also like too what you do with, you're creating relationships with concierge medicine providers, and you're a concierge medicine provider. So, I assume you guys speak the same language, and that I think is important when you are reaching out to other providers for potential mutual referral relationships, versus, I wouldn't necessarily suggest reaching out to all of the possible medical providers in the area, especially if your practice philosophies are not similar. It might not be a great match.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a good point. A lot of the doctors that we work with are also broken off from bigger hospitals. I broke off from the bigger PT companies. They tend to be experienced and know that they want to give better care to their patients, essentially. So we're both kind of in it for the same reasons, which helps us connect. I would admit, my experience, connect on the front end was kind of like business owner to business owner, because a lot of them are, starting their little couple doctor practices very similar to what my practice is like. So I kind of connect with them that way. And it's kind of a relationship that naturally happens because they want to refer their patients if they think their patient's going to benefit from physical therapy. They're not wanting to send them to some of these bigger other companies that they used to send to when they were at the hospitals that they had bad experience with. So we were positioned in a way where we could cater to their type of clientele very nicely, and I think they realized that once they got to know us a little bit more. And then obviously taking really good care of the first couple referrals that you get from a doctor is super important. You have to do the right thing and wow them and hope that they get better and hope that they're not crazy patients that speak negatively of you. So I think I also got lucky that I had a couple referrals early on from certain doctors that, were really good patients that did really, really well, that I made, one of those long-term connections with, that then went back and talked to their doctor and told them about us. And I think that's the best marketing to the doctors, to have a patient of theirs that goes back to them and says positive things about us, because that sticks in the doctor's head and makes them way more likely to refer to you again.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're as a provider, when you're able to find other providers that your patients will be safe with and will be taken care of, like you said, it's huge. Because at the end of the day, all the business stuff, we are also in it to take care of people, and to take care of other humans. So let me see, as we are sort of coming to the end of our interview tonight, if you had top 3 pieces of advice for a, new practice owner or soon to be new practice owner, only 3, what would you say?
Number 1, when you're 75% sure of something, just do it. Because you're never going to be 100% certain.
That's good advice.
I think that's number 1. I would say number two, I guess, and this might be more specific to me, but I do recommend starting as a side hustle. I think that was important. That's an important start, especially for someone who's hesitant and scared or whatnot, but to kind of
Yeah.
like not ditch your primary income right away and kind of dabble a little bit to make sure, your system works and you like it and it is the right decision for you. I would say start with a side hustle. If you're 75% sure, then do it now.
Yeah.
And let's see, last piece of advice. I think with every decision you make within the business, always focus on what's best for the patient. That's why if I have a dilemma on something, I always go back to like, okay, in this situation, like what is the best thing for the patient? Okay, that's how we're going to do things. And it always seems to never steer us or me wrong.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really good way, like whenever you're feeling like lost or conflicted, like it's like a North Star to look to, when you're like, okay, here's a decision I have to make, and like what are the financial implications, or how's it going to affect me, or my team, but like ultimately it is for the patient.
For sure.
And sometimes that can be like scary, especially like first thing that comes to mind is, if a patient is coming like close to being discharged and they don't really need you anymore, but you don't necessarily have somebody coming in to replace them. I know that can be something that causes fear in newer practice owners, because then you're like, what about the money? Like where, like how am I going to get that back? But, if you put out there like what you want, like you put out there that you want to be taking care of patients well and do what's best for them, like you said, it's going to come back, and you have to like trust that it's going to come back too.
Yeah. If you're focused on like the money side of it, or you put yourself in a situation where you have too much risk and you have to focus on the money side of it, I think that's dangerous. Like, I think like we alluded to earlier, like my story of like getting rid of the debt and kind of starting with $2,000 slowly, I think allowed me to focus on the patient at the beginning and then not have to live off the income of the business when it's really small, and have like stability still somewhere else. And that then allowed me to accumulate savings in the business to, again, be able to then jump over to another job and have stability still and still be able to focus on the patient. And then the business side kind of took care of itself doing it that way, like over time.
Yeah. Yeah. So trust in the process, like everybody says. Cool. Well, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and everything. If anybody here listening, watching, if they want to check out your practice and see more about what you do, where can they find you?
It's www.customfitc.com. So CUSTOMFIT, the letter C.com. Or you can email me at jeffb@customfitc.com.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I know that was a lot of like really good like tips and information, from somebody who's been doing this for so long, and you've had so many like different experiences throughout the business and like different aspects of growth, I suppose, like different phases. So just everybody who's listening, just trust what Jeff says, because he's been doing it long enough, so he probably knows some stuff. And if you guys have any other questions, like Jeff said, feel free to reach out to him, reach out to me, comment on the video, and let us know if you need anything. So that'll bring us to the end of our interview tonight. Thank you again, Jeff, and hope everybody has a good night.
And anyone who's listening, good luck, and get out there and do it.
Yay. Awesome. All right. Good night, everybody.